Spring is here and the shopping list is long. Time to make a Lowe's run. Buy 3 bags, get 3 free of Stay Green 1 cubic foot garden soil. Plus, right now members can earn 4 times the points on an eligible purchase. Start spring off strong with these deals and more. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 3/25 while supplies last. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for details. Subject to change. Point boosters subject to exclusions and more terms apply. One-time only offer.
Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to Real Estate Real and Unscripted with Nicole. I'm excited to have you back with us today. In today's episode, we are going to be speaking to Neal Rice, who is a VA accredited elder law attorney. And our conversation today is going to circle around everything relating to veterans, their benefits. We'll talk a little bit about even loans, things that relate to real estate. So I'm excited to have him on. Welcome, Neal. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course, of course. So for listeners out there meeting you for the first time today, what is your background and what do you do on a day-to-day as an elder law attorney and a VA accredited attorney?
My name is Neal Rice, and I graduated from Boston College undergraduate and got my law degree at the University of South Carolina Rice School of Law. I became an elder law and VA attorney because my grandfather, Donald Neal Rice, was a veteran of World War II who saw action in Okinawa. He's my hero, and he's the whole reason why I do what I do. So I spend my days, and the rest of my law firm spends our days, helping seniors and veterans with asset protection, Medicaid planning, special needs planning, some traditional estate planning, and of course, veterans benefits.
Amazing. I love that. And that your grandfather is that inspiration. That's beautiful. That's so awesome. Why did you choose to focus on VA benefits, the VA benefits side of elder law? And what's less commonly known about it?
VA is a much derided agency and is often the butt end of many jokes. What people don't understand, these are some overworked and underpaid individuals who really could use the assistance of attorneys, helping them make sure that those cases get processed properly, timely, and in a lawful manner. So the main focus that we try to do for veterans is making sure that they've got a holistic plan put together that takes advantage of all the benefits available to them and will help them stretch out their money to last 2 to 3 or 4 times longer than they might have originally expected it to, especially when confronted with those really, really exorbitant long-term care costs that more and more folks are running into each day. So typically, elder law attorneys will do durable powers of attorney, healthcare powers of attorney. They'll do traditional estate planning like wills and trusts, but they also coordinate this with long-term care benefits planning like Medicaid and VA, and also do special needs planning for disabled individuals who may also be under 65 or individuals who have special needs. And we also focus on elder abuse and exploitation prevention and remediation.
Amazing. All stuff that is super relevant. And in the industry I'm in as a realtor, I primarily focus in the senior space. And so I've become very well versed in all of that over the years and being able to help my clients when I see the need to, have them go to someone like you from, being able to help them with Medicaid planning and affording the costs. Because unfortunately, what we see is that people did not really realize how expensive it was to get old and how much it is going to cost for that care. And I think there was a lot of, people over the years that were like, oh, Medicare, and I'll have, there was no planning, I feel like. And so a lot of people in this generation are in a position where the cost of care is so high, they need it. And a lot of our younger children, are becoming like the sandwich generation. They're taking care of their senior parents, they're taking care of their kids, and nobody really planned for those costs. So from a veteran's lens, how do families pay for this stuff? How do they pay for long-term care in America? What are options that are specifically available for our veterans? And, what are some of the biggest misconceptions around that?
When you're confronted with long-term care costs that can be $80,000 a year for in-home care. 24-hour care can cost you almost $200,000 a year, or even in an assisted living facility that can still cost $4,000 to $8,000 a month. Your options are pretty limited, and you either can private pay out of your own pocket, or you were lucky enough to be one of the 10% of Americans who earned enough income to be able to afford a long-term care policy. If you don't have a whole lot of money or a whole lot of income, then your only options left after that are basically Medicaid and veterans benefits. And the way we try to help these individuals is because most folks didn't do the long-term financial planning or tax planning to be able to afford options 1 and 2, private pay or long-term care policy. And even then, long-term care policies often have limits, 3-5 year limits, and folks are living or finding that they need care a lot longer than they originally anticipated. So when your financial and estate plan starts to fall apart because you start experiencing exorbitant long-term care costs, you want to talk to an elder law attorney sooner rather than later, because you'll have a lot more options when it comes to planning for your future long-term care and financial security.
No, for sure. What are you seeing in the market as care needs increase with respect to housing, aging in place, downsizing, moving near family, assisted living? You mentioned about how 10%, is that a stat? That's like a ironclad stat, about 10% of people actually have long-term care? Or roughly?
So can afford it. Not even that 10% is purchasing the long-term care, but yeah, exactly. Yeah. But if you're like the 90% of the rest of Americans, you're not even in a financial position to afford the premium payments on a long-term care policy. And so a lot of times what happens is we see ourselves individuals that want to ideally stay at home. Well, if you're going to start suffering from long-term care or chronic illnesses, then you may be looking at renovating or modifying your home, enabling you to remain and age safely in place. Other individuals, the home is simply too large, especially after the kids leave or as you get older. You may be looking to downsize to a more manageable place. You may be looking to move close to family or other support structures there that can help aid you and live with as much independence as possible. That's our goal as elder law attorneys, to help you be as independent as possible. Other folks end up realizing, maybe I would be better served, or it would be more cost effective for me to be in an assisted living facility. And they may want to rent or sell their existing residence and then consider various investment or asset protection strategies to help fund their care for the rest of their lives.
You had mentioned about doing modifications to a home. Are there benefits available to veterans that allow for that? Aging in place and grants or, anything like that might be available for veterans if they may need that?
Yes, there's a number of benefits, which will start with home modifications. And the most important one of these typically require you to have a service-connected injury. So if we're looking at certain types of, they're called adapted housing grants, Specially Adapted Housing Program, the SAH, and a smaller option or similar option called the SHA, Special Housing Adaptation. These are going to be able to provide for veterans who have severe disabilities, like a loss of limb, blindness, or severe burns, to help them buy, build, or adapt a home for independent living. Other types of veterans who have service-connected disabilities, but are also able to move around the house with the help of a caregiver, may qualify for the smaller SHA grant, which oftentimes require a service-connected disability, which involves the loss or loss of use of both your hands, severe burns, or certain respiratory or breathing illnesses. The larger grant will require you to have the loss of more than one limb, the loss of a lower leg, blindness in both eyes, or severe burns, or if you were in Afghanistan or Iraq, if you've lost a foot or leg and cannot walk without the balance of help, braces, crutches, or canes. So these programs are quite robust and can provide up to $126,000 a year for the larger benefit, and up to $25,000 a year for the smaller benefit, and can be used potentially up to 6 times.
Wow. So I feel like from my experience and from family members who were veterans who had the ability to get these benefits and just in general, I feel like it's very hard to navigate. And I remembered, family members saying, oh my God, like I had to like go to war to get this stuff for this person. Right. So literally I remembered my aunt saying, it was so hard. So where does, where you come in, allowing to kind of maybe help potentially get them organized so they know what they can have at their disposal, and then also maybe help move things? Or is there any, obviously benefits to working with a great partner like you that would help somebody instead of kind of just going at it themselves?
What knowledge is power, right? And so the first thing is just knowing about these programs. Second, a lot of folks can try to apply on their own, and it's a very, very form-driven process. But reading these forms is like reading Chinese. Right. So a lot of times having an attorney there can help you translate into regular English what they're saying on these crazy forms. Also knowing what forms to get in what order and when to submit them so as to prevent any delays or unnecessary denials can be really key, because a lot of times we want to try to get this right on the first shot. Exactly. For other types of benefits or other types of grants, if there's a denial, an unlawful denial or inappropriate denial, then we may be able to handle the appeal on a contingent basis for them and represent them before the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Oh, awesome. Sorry. So from your perspective, when does it make sense to consider selling your home versus renting out the home if you're looking to fund care?
If an individual wants to be able to stay in the home, renting is definitely not going to be an option, and selling is not going to be an option. So if that's the case, they will ideally look towards the Wartime Veterans Pension with Aid and Attendance. This can reimburse them for the long-term care expenses that they're spending on aides who can help keep them in the home as long as possible. If you combine this with various grants to help modify and improve the home, then you've got a pretty solid program to be able to enable you to age in place. For individuals who are beginning to realize that maybe they need more than one shift a day. Perhaps maybe they're looking at maybe 2 shifts a day of having individuals come in and help. At that point in time, it becomes a lot more cost effective to look at something like an assisted living facility. And if we're thinking about going to an assisted living facility, those are going to have similarly expensive costs. A lot of ranges between $5,000 to $7,000 or $6,000 to $8,000 a month. And so if you then want to consider the options, you can potentially rent out your home, or you could potentially rent out your primary residence and still have this intent to return home, right? If you ask any client, or if you ask anybody, do you want to go home? Would you prefer to be home? Yes, we're all going to say yes. So if you can be at the assisted living facility, receive the care you need there, and rent the home out, then you can not only cover the carrying costs of the home and potentially leave a legacy for your family, but you can also apply that net rental income towards room and board costs or long-term care costs at the assisted living facility. Most folks will just jump straight away to the option of, oh, mom's going to have to go to a home. I'm going to need to sell her house or her residence to be able to pay for that. And the idea is that, yeah, that's kind of a default option. You don't need any help to come up with that option, but there's a lot better options out there, which involve talking to an attorney first. For example, we may be able to place those assets in a trust. And for most of the time, if we're going to be putting assets in a trust, we're dealing with VA waiting periods and VA look-back periods and waiting 3 years or more to get the benefits we want. But there's actually a loophole for the VA that most folks don't realize. And that's when used in conjunction with a trust, that can enable a client who's moving to an assisted living facility to potentially place their house in a trust, protect the assets so that if it's sold, they can still access VA benefits, and the money's not going to count against them. The reason for this is because the house itself, as a primary residence, is not considered a countable asset. And the VA has rules that will prevent you from trying to get under their financial thresholds So you're not allowed to give away money just so that you can qualify for VA benefits. Gifting is a big no-no. And so they can look back 3 years for any gifting you've done and penalize you or issue a penalty period based on the size of the gift.
So I was going to ask that. Yeah, I was going to ask that question as far as like going into the details of like, what is that VA 3 for people who don't even know what that means, right? What is this 3-year look back rule? What types of transfers trigger that problem? Because people might have done things in advance of meeting you and then be in a position where they're like, oh, shoot, now what, right? So definitely for everyone out there that this may be new to, what is that whole, from beginning to end? What is that?
Another app for inventory, one for CRM. Oh, don't forget accounting. Wait, which login was that?
Or you could use Odoo, one fully integrated system that does it all without the hassle. Ditch the app overload. Get everything your business needs on one platform. Try Odoo free today at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
That look like?
The VA is going to penalize. So the VA, because they have such strict financial thresholds, if you were to, most folks will say, okay, well, think about it. Well, I might give my kids their inheritance a little earlier. Or I might hand, my brokerage account and hand that over to my kid so that they can use the money for me, but it's not in my hands, right? I don't have it. So the VA, knowing and thinking about this, had created something called a 3-year look back. And that enables them to go through your financials up to 3 years and look back for any sort of gifting that was not compensated, right? If there's an asset that they'll count against your net worth, which is checking accounts, savings accounts, stocks, bonds, brokerages, gold bars, additional properties besides your primary residence, those are all countable assets. And if you gift that asset to a family member, or if you gift it to a trust, same thing, then the VA is going to issue a penalty period. And since they can't look back 3 years, most attorneys or most traditional plans will involve putting the house and some money in the trust, waiting the requisite 3 years, and then applying for benefits. But we have this segment of the population, which I think a growing segment of the population, which we like to call house rich. And these individuals have the vast majority of their assets tied, or even a significant majority of their assets tied up in their biggest value property, which is their primary residence. And that's a very, very difficult asset to unlock, to get liquidity from without taking out home equity line of credit, or God forbid, a reverse mortgage. And so there's other ways to access the asset value of your house without actually having the cash sit in your hand and thereby disqualify you from these VA benefits. Because the VA benefits can provide up to $2,800 a month as a direct deposit into your account, reimbursing you for the expenses you're paying on long-term care. That's aids in the home or an assisted living facility.
And just to kind of segue and kind of go full circle here, because I think we may have missed that part. So the VA benefits that you get and Medicaid planning benefits, they're income based driven, right? So we're talking about having too much in ways of assets and money. What are those thresholds? And so obviously if you are above those thresholds, then you don't have the ability to qualify. And so if you could speak to a little bit about what that looks like from, numbers.
The numbers actually just recently went up, and the net asset threshold is about $162,000. So it's it's relatively low compared to the value of most people's houses. And so that's why with a lot of individuals, the minute you sell the house, you put yourself over that net worth limit, and now you're not in a position to immediately qualify for the VA. So because the VA forgot, I think they forgot. We lawyers have gotten together. We can't quite figure out how they missed this, but they, in their big rule change they put out in 2018, they did not include the primary residence as a countable asset. And so if you're only going to be penalized for putting countable assets in a trust, the primary residence is an accountable asset. You can gift it to a trust with no penalty. So what's the immediate result of this? is that if you're thinking to yourself, if you're thinking, okay, I'll create the trust on day one, put the house in the trust on day two, sell the house on day three, and then apply for benefits on day four. That's all technically a scenario that could occur. That's how fast the change can be made from out of trust into trust. And then the sale will no longer impact their ability to get veterans benefits because the proceeds from the sale of the house are protected in the trust. Now, if you turn around and put $300,000 in the trust, you're waiting the 3 years because otherwise you're going to get a penalty period if you apply. So that's why a lot of folks don't realize that it's a great idea to come and at least see what your options are and know what the shot is, because you may not have to wait for 3 years. There's so many clients that come to us and say, I just sold the house, I'm ready to move in, what do I do? And I said, well, if you had just talked to me 6 months ago.
So at that point in time, what do? They have that penalty period, right? And so how does that practically affect the families at that point in time?
What happens is rather than trigger a huge penalty period, we will have to wait the full 3 years. And they're basically on their own private pay until either their assets are naturally below that net asset limit, God forbid, or we've waited out that 3-year period, and then we can apply for benefits because the VA cannot look back more than 3 years. They can look back up to 3 years. And anything after that, we're free and clear. So that's the issue is that if they just come in beforehand, we'd be able to potentially apply immediately, not 3 years from then.
One thing I wanted to mention too, as far as like misconceptions, because this was all very new to me when I pretty much sell mostly senior real estate. I do a lot of probate, a lot of situations where I have seniors that are going into assisted livings and having all these considerations. When I learned about Medicaid planning and, VA planning and Medicaid planning, I remembered one of the attorneys that had been, educating on it. They were saying like, it's people think, oh, you're like hiding the money and you're pretending that you don't know. It's for like that sweet spot of people, because at the end of the day, you might have $300,000-$400,000, but if you're in an assisted living facility community, that's not going to last very long, right? So it's effectively a legal way of making sure that that money is shielded and used. Also, I know from my experience of hearing about it, used for things to help that senior as well. Like you could potentially have that money that's in those properly sheltered ways to be able to have like a family member that can also help with care and things like that, or even like just cost of living in life, right? Like, so it allows you to not be destitute, but some people will say, oh, well, the guy has $800,000. It's like, yeah, but he's 60 and he has Alzheimer's and he's going to be in care for years. Like that 800 means nothing, right? We're not helping like multimillionaires get their money like hidden. We're helping people who need to be able to, right? So I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, but I remembered very like clearly when I was learning about that, I'm like, that it's doing the good thing, right? We're helping those people because that money is going very quickly, very quickly.
Hide is a 4-letter word in our industry. We hate the term hide because we're not hiding anything. We're simply taking assets that are non-exempt and finding a way to make them exempt. And we welcome review from the VA, from the state, from the federal government, because the whole idea is that we're doing things in a compliant fashion, right? These folks, these men and women served. They've paid. They've done their time. They've earned these benefits. And the VA simply doesn't advertise that these benefits exist.
Right.
So the burden is on people like you and me to get out there and educate and inform them so that they know, hey, you've already earned this benefit. We've talked to hundreds of veterans who say, oh, I'm doing all right, I don't need it. Save it for the guy that really needs it. But then when, exactly like you said, you're looking on the wall. If you're burning through $100,000 a year and you're in your 70s, well, guess what? Your life expectancy is a lot longer than what folks thought it was going to be 10 years ago, right? And that $100,000, even $1 million is only going to last you 10 years. So that gets you from 70 to 80. What are you going to do from 80 to 90? right? So the whole idea is that if you plan ahead, we can take your money and stretch it out to make it last many times longer than it should. Yeah.
Exactly. No, for sure.
Spring is here and the shopping list is long. Time to make a Lowe's run. Buy 3 bags, get 3 free of Stay Green 1 cubic foot garden soil. Plus, right now, members can earn 4 times the points on an eligible purchase. Start spring off strong with these deals and more. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 3/25 while supplies last. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for details. Subject to change. Point boosters subject to exclusions and more terms apply. One-time only offer.
So switching gears to housing benefits, what are the major VA housing benefits people should know about besides, we were talking about the healthcare stuff from a VA standpoint?
So from the major housing benefits are going to include not only those adaptive grants we talked about, but also a VA loan or a VA-backed loan. The whole idea there is that the government's going to stand the government's going to stand behind a loan or a mortgage from a lender, and that means the lender's going to have a lot less fear about foreclosure because they know the VA is going to compensate them for some or all of the losses. This means that you're going to get a loan under much better terms. And whether it's a loan to purchase a new home, whether you're going to be refinancing an existing loan, or whether you need to cash out refinance to pay off some debt or pay for school and take care of other needs. If you're a veteran or a surviving spouse of a veteran, then you just need to go ahead and get a certificate of eligibility. And that's going to be able to, the lender's going to be able to take that and use that to qualify you for a VA loan. And there's a bunch of great reasons why you should use a VA loan. I know, Nicole, you are familiar with these, day in and day out. But there's so many great reasons. The main one is 0 down payment.
Yeah.
And with a VA loan, there's, almost all VA loans don't even have any form of down payment, because it's not required. And so for individuals who are going with a conventional mortgage, if you don't pay a down payment, or if you have another federally funded, loan program like FHA loans, which will let you get a house with only 3%, those options come with a significant added cost of mortgage insurance. And that is going to reduce your buying power, and it's going to make your monthly spend go up. And you're just paying a whole bunch of money to private mortgage insurance that simply does not apply if you have a VA benefit. So not only can you put 0 down, you're not getting dinged for the mortgage insurance that would be affecting everybody else. There's also some additional. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I'll plug in after.
And on top of that, when you couple that with the flexible credit guidelines, there's no hard cutoff for debt to income ratios, shorter waiting periods for negative credit events to fall off. Then what you have is lower interest rates. In fact, some of the interest rates, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but over the past 2 years, looking at data from Optimal Blue, it looks like the VA loan rates have been actually some of the lowest average rates on the market.
Oh yeah, for sure. I had, and I was going to say another benefit too, and it's a great benefit, and they sacrificed for it, obviously. But if you have the full disability, you don't pay the ad valorem property taxes, so that increases your buying power as well. But I had worked with a buyer and her wife, and they, she had that full benefit, and that helped them buy an awesome house. And their rate was very low. Yeah, I mean, they were getting like 5 and change when the rates were like 7.5. I mean, they were getting really, really good rate, and they had great, credit and all that too. But yes, it is definitely less. And from my world, working with realtors, and I'm always big about just education, and knowledge is power. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misconceptions and stigmas, and terrible because of I'm very vehemently I voice my opinion on that when I'll speak to a realtor, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's a VA loan," and I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, the appraisals come in lower." Are you on another? Are you serious? Who taught you that stupidity? And when I hear that, they're like, well, they're not putting anything down. I'm like, yeah, that's their given right. Like, doesn't mean they're desolate, that they don't have to put anything down. But I think in my space, I've faced so much stupidity when it comes to these loans and people and judgments of saying that, just the stigmas around that they don't, the biggest one is they don't appraise as high and they're difficult. Okay, let me explain why they're difficult. That's because they need to ensure that there's no safety issues and problems. So yes, if you have wood rot, that's going to be a problem. If you have an illegal garage conversion, that's going to be a problem. If you have work that was not done in a workmanlike manner, appraiser's going to have an issue with that. If you have electrical hanging from the ceiling, if you have, a rail it's about that, right? So it's yeah, Mr. Seller, yes, they might have to come to you and tell you need to potentially fix something, right? But at the end of the day, those loans have been, I love being able to close a VA loan. And I think that, even during the height of the market, VA loans, I had a lot of VA loans on my listings. And what was cool about those was in the height of the market when, COVID and pandemic and we were getting over asking and people's, firstborn child and, half their car or whatever for offers. The VA buyers, I had a lot of them on my listings. The VA buyers, they had no down payment, right? So they had cash to give 30,000 over appraisal, right? Because they were like, all right, I'm going to give, I'm good with doing this above appraisal because I'm not putting down money. So, I think I love that exists for our veterans. And I think there's so many benefits out there that unfortunately are very hard to kind of navigate, but they deserve it in every shape and form. So.
I hate hearing, just like I said, I hate hearing when people say, "Oh, well, that's hard." Nothing good comes easy, right? And these folks deserve that much effort on our part. They already served their country. They served honorably, and we should match the effort that they've already put in. And then to kind of time back to those great property tax benefits you mentioned. A lot of folks think, "Well, I got to be 100% service connected." Well, maybe they moved from a state that has to be 100% service connected. Believe it or not, Florida actually has a couple of great extra property tax relief rules that don't require you to be 100% disabled. If, for example, if you have a 10% disability rating or greater, you can get a $5,000 exemption. Right off the bat. And that's just for having a 10% disability rating. Or if you have a combat-related disability with a higher than 10% disability rating, you may be able to receive a property tax discount that's equal to your disability percentage. So it can, for 100%, that goes all the way up to 100%. But there's that whole range there, which, again, many other states don't have that wide breadth of tax benefits available to the veterans themselves and the surviving spouses. There's a lot of state programs as well that folks can kind of look to for help in these sort of situations. I just want to give a quick shout out to Habitat for Humanity, Habijax in Jacksonville, which offers no interest mortgages and affordable housing solutions. Mm-hmm. Homes for Heroes.
Oh, yeah.
They'll provide discounts on real estate agent fees. Yeah. Oh, you know them. Closing costs for veterans in cities like Tampa and Orlando. Supportive services from Operation Sacred Trust and Mission United can provide housing stabilization, financial counseling for veterans in South Florida, Orlando. And Operation Homefront will work with lenders like Chase to sometimes donate homes and mortgages and also provide transitional housing and other non-housing types of direct financial assistance. Because maybe you can make that mortgage payment, but that child care payment is what's going to be putting you over the edge. So having some other support that isn't directly going to something like rent or providing a house, but enabling you to stay in that house and be housing stable is a really, really big thing.
That's awesome. You threw out so many different things. Take note, people. If you have any questions, I'll give his info at the end. So I am very big on collaboration among trusted professionals. What does an ideal team approach look like between attorney, realtor, lenders, CPA, financial advisors? What should us as realtors be looking out for so we could also best serve, best serve our clients within this space? And, what do you see as the ideal effort in, helping our veterans?
It all starts with listening. Don't go in there and think you have the right idea for the client. Listen to what they're talking about. Because if they say, "Oh, I'm having trouble going up and down the stairs," or maybe I'd like to be a little closer to my family, or the traffic here is just too big. I need to be a little bit smaller. Those are questions that should be triggering flags in your mind to say, okay, there's some other issues going on here, and then you say, well, okay, what about your to allude to these documents, who's going to be here to help you? Do you have family members nearby? Have you sat down and introduced your family members and talked to them about your financial advisor? Have you introduced them to your accountant? Do they even know anything about you? So the first most important thing is listening, and then in asking or encouraging your client to have a conversation with their family members. That's where the most important things are. Then the conversation begins to expand and include other people at the table or other stakeholders. Because once one of the professionals has identified an issue, they'll know where their area of knowledge is, and they'll know where it stops and when to bring in another professional to advise on one aspect or another. Maybe you've got some issue. Maybe they want to do something that maybe have some tax consequences. Then that's when you're going to recommend, hey, you should have a conversation with your accountant. And if their client's having trouble expressing the ideas or the concepts that you're trying to get past them, then that's when you offer to have a conference call with that individual. It's also really important to ideally have a 1-year checkup with each of your advisors, that your accountant, your financial advisor, your attorney, your realtor friends, just so you get a sense as to what's going on in the market and you begin to know your options. That's the most important thing. So first is knowing thyself and your family, then beginning to rely on your professionals so that you can know what your options are at these point in time. And then as you begin to touch on different areas and questions, that the professionals will oftentimes be comfortable going into conference calls with other professionals. We're on conference calls all the times with CPAs or realtors or financial advisors. And the idea is that you're going to be able to provide a holistic view of a plan for a client. And you want to have everyone at the table working together, rowing in the same direction, going towards the same goal. The client's the one issuing the directives here, but they're relying on advice. And if there's a disconnect between the advisors, they may not know what to listen to or who to listen to, or how to choose what's going to be the best option. So often getting these voices in a room together can help smooth out any misconceptions, misunderstandings. And so, and oftentimes the advisors will quickly get together and come to a unified solution that's going to be the best option for the client in most cases. And then the final benefit is that good advisors will suss out bad eggs. And if you've got, your son's friend who, was doing just fine as a professional, but maybe wasn't as good as they could be, working. Once you have your professionals collaborating with each other, they'll be able to tell if someone's falling short of what ethical standards or what client services standards would be expected of nowadays.
Spring is here and the shopping list is long. Time to make a Lowe's run. Buy 3 bags, get 3 free of Stay Green 1 cubic foot garden soil. Plus, right now, members can earn 4 times the points on an eligible purchase. Start spring off strong with these deals and more. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 3/25 while supplies last. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for details. Subject to change. Point boosters subject to exclusions and more terms apply. One-time only offer.
Yeah, no, and I'm just reflecting kind of like as a realtor, having the exposure to this space, to you, to the planning side of it, to all. I look at my job as a holistic professional. I don't just take you and sell your house. I need to know where you're going. I need to know why you're going. I need to know what's driving you, because oftentimes, and don't get me wrong, people have the right to make decisions for themselves, but I feel like sometimes people don't make the right decisions because they don't have the right information. So I have so many sellers over the years that were seniors that might have had, a $500,000 home, and the husband now needs to be in memory care, and she, they don't have kids who are involved, and they're like, I need to sell this home so that I can afford to have him go to care because I can't do this anymore. Our bank account is wiped. And I'm like, have you spoken to a Medicaid planning attorney? And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, good Lord, thank God. Like, I feel like good. I'm like, yes, okay, well, speak to this one, right? And, what is that? Like, and I explain it briefly within my purview. And I say, listen, speak to them because you're in a position that, you might be able to get yourself situated where you'll be able to make that 500,000 stretch longer. Like, let him plan, speak to them and have them plan it. So as a realtor, I've seen situations where people are selling those seniors' homes and they're like, oh, they had to sell it, or the agent will be like, oh, they had to sell because they give us too much information, right? Stuff they're not supposed to disclose, right? They had to sell because they're going into assisted living and they didn't have the money and blah, blah, blah. And I just want to be like, did you speak to this? Like, because people don't know. And as agents, we don't know. So how can we help our clients on a bigger scale than just giving them the sale of their house and moving on and taking your check and being happy? Like, that's not enough for me. So I think that, and
not all the one size fits all. Exactly.
No. And I see us as more of the, and we come and we're kind of like the hub. Like, people are like, who do you know that can do this? Who can, can you give me a good electrician? Can you give me someone? Like, they come to us for like everything. And I think that, being able to put someone like you in their arsenal to be able to say, oh, hey, I learned something new. Let's have you talk to somebody to see if you have potential to, get this benefit that works for you as a veteran and, regular Medicaid planning. So
as a realtor, I can see you, connecting with so many different aspects of their life, just even contemplating the transaction as significant as the sale of a home. You're already perfectly positioned to be that resource for an individual and obviously really, really great at what you do. So, it's really wonderful to see professionals really take their duties or on behalf of their clients really seriously and responsibly, and not just look at them as another sale or another dollar.
Yeah, no, and I don't, people will say, oh, I'm going to move into this community. And it's like, okay, but do they have room? Did you know what room is available? When is it going to be available? Like, we can't list it right now. You're going to have to make sure that you have right? So like, you have to maneuver that whole thing where that's not typical. And I challenge my industry and my peers to look at the whole picture, because that's really what's important. We're helping people with the buying and selling, and that's a big part of their life chapter. And there's a lot of things that touch on that. So, are there any common mistakes that you see with families making, and things that you kind of wish people didn't do, or maybe we touched on that? If there's anything extra out there that, you would want to tell a veteran family member that might be responsible for a parent right now, or maybe an adult child, what kind of advice would you tell them to do? Like, what should they do? What should they do?
This misconception we're constantly fighting against as attorneys is folks assuming that, oh, I've got too much, or I'm not going to qualify. And the simple fact of the matter is, we help clients that have, multimillionaires, millions of dollars that are protected in assets for clients, not only to enable them to qualify for benefits, to give them the highest standard of care possible, the highest quality of life. And if we've done a good enough job, then maybe you get to leave a little legacy for the next generation. So it's don't make assumptions. Don't think, oh, well, this is going to be too hard or impossible. You're never going to know unless you have that conversation, unless you have that, you actually are willing to go through and ask yourself those hard questions. And that can help your attorney, your financial advisor, your accountant give you better advice. So the first thing I always like to say is know thyself. 2, know thy options, know your options. And then 3, plan ahead. Because the options are always going to be better. And you're going to always have more options the earlier or the sooner you start. So I usually like to tell folks, ideally 6 months before you plan any sort of big move or transaction, an absolute minimum. That's usually crisis planning.
Yep.
But ideally, we're looking 3 to 5 years ahead at that horizon. and the advisors are the ones who are going to be best placed to know what the new tax rules are coming up, to know what new changes are going to be happening in the housing market, and how best to forecast strategies to make sure you've got financial stability and security going forward.
You have to plan ahead.
We all want the same thing.
Yeah, you have to plan ahead.
We want the best for you.
That's the biggest thing I see is, from my touching on the end, ending this and wrapping this up, is planning ahead. So Neal does VA benefits, but he's an elder law attorney, and there's a lot of aspects involved in that. Get your ducks in a row. I like to tell people you have to have your ducks in a row, because at the end of the day, if, have a conversation with someone like Neal, make sure that you have all your right paperwork in place. Make sure, sometimes people are coming from other states and they have a POA from another state that's not really valid here because it's not done the way that's required here. And then they come and they ask me to sell a house, and their mother is now with Alzheimer's, and that the POA is not valid anymore, and she can't sign because it's not a valid POA. So you're not my seller's POA, and she now can't sign, right? So we're going to talk about these subjects on another session with some other awesome attorneys as well, because I've got a handful that are amazing. And so that's why I wanted to kind of bracket it out. But, if you have any, not just about Medicaid planning and VA planning benefits, but, if you guys have any questions, please reach out to an attorney before it becomes too late. Like Neal said, then it becomes crisis planning. And, you don't want to be forced by your children into a community that you don't want to be in, that just was because you fell and hurt yourself. You want to get ahead of it and make sure that you have all those ducks in a row, all the paperwork in a row, all the documents that will allow for your family to do things on your behalf, and you not be in a position where you become a ward of the state. And then that's another topic that we're going to discuss too. So, at the end of the day, I'm very big about how important it is, and also speaking to the right professionals to get your right documents, not doing things yourself. There's value to that. So I just want to say thank you so much, Neal, for joining me and for imparting all this information. If anyone wants to reach out or has any questions, where can I send them to? Where can they find you? Website, perhaps, that you can share?
Yes. Yep. You come to www.elderlegalsolutionsllp.com, and you'll be able to shoot us any questions you like. And we also have a resources page where you'll be able to go ahead and go through some links, and we have try to connect folks to as many great resources for veterans and seniors out there as possible. Amazing.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for joining. This wraps up our episode today of Real Estate Real and Unscripted with Nicole. I look forward to having you on the next episode. Have a great day.
Spring is here and the shopping list is long. Time to make a Lowe's run. Buy 3 bags, get 3 free of Stay Green 1 cubic foot garden soil. Plus, right now, members can earn 4 times the points on an eligible purchase. Start spring off strong with these deals and more. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 3/25 while supplies last. Soil offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for details. Subject to change. Point boosters subject to exclusions and more terms apply. One time only offer.